Okay, we're going to get this show on the road here. Welcome to Gardening with William DeMille. This is our Thursday Q&A. This is where I help you have the best garden of your entire life. We're going to be discussing gardening, farming, livestock, the Georgic tradition, soil health, education. The purpose of this is to increase your health from the ground up. So I'm excited to be able to do these little 30-minute classes every Thursday. We meet every Thursday except for the Thursdays that we don't. Like Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday and we don't do it then. When I'm teaching my boot camp classes, I don't do it on those Thursdays. My boot camps are Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and so I don't do it on that Thursday when I have boot camps. And we're planning 4 boot camps for this year. So, and the next one's coming up in 2 weeks. So that is pretty exciting. The picture you can see here is the cover of my book, and my book will be released on the 22nd of April. So that is coming up in just another couple of weeks. So that's pretty exciting. And I'm thrilled about this book because we have been working on this my entire life. We, meaning me and people around me and my wife, my family. So it's been pretty great. I actually sat down to write it about 2 years ago. And so it's been a 2-year project to get it done. But the research that is in the book is about 2 years worth. I mean, 40 years worth, because I'm 40. When do I turn 50? That's this year. So that's pretty great. So yeah, about 40 years of research, because I started growing the family garden by myself when I was 12, 13 years old, that summer when I went from 12 to 13. And I was very interested and started learning all the gardening stuff as a child, 8, 9, 10 years old. So at 10 years old, I was really studying all the books, and it was so fascinating and wonderful. I absolutely loved that. And my dad was frustrated with me because I was a late reader. I didn't read very quickly. And he was a 4th grade school teacher. And here I was, 9 and 10 years old, and I refused to read anything and do schoolwork. So he was pulling his hair out about over that, which was kind of funny. And but I learned to read because I loved gardening. My dad had an extensive library, and a lot of the books he had were about agriculture, farming, gardening, livestock, farms, soil, all that stuff. And I loved it so much that I learned to read because I wanted to be a gardener. And then I studied and learned every gardening method that I could come up with. And we tried them all over the years of me being a teenager. And some things worked and some things didn't. And I didn't know why they didn't work, because the pictures in the gardening books sure looked good. And so we started learning that things work differently in different climates, and not every method's going to work real great in every climate. But there are some things that work really good in every climate. And that means it's a principle of Mother Nature. Like, you need water to grow plants. That's a principle. You need light, from the sun to grow plants. That's a principle. So there's a lot of things that you do need. But what if you're in the desert and you do things to get rid of water? Well, that's the backwards thing to do. What if you're in a really wet area and you grow in the methods that you would use in a desert? Well, that's the backwards thing to do. So a lot of these types of things are in my book. And so it's just my experience, my lifetime of what has worked and what hasn't, and mostly based on the principles that can grow the most healthy food in the world. So I'm excited about that, to be able to share all this. So these are the ways that I help everybody in the world grow food. And I've helped a lot of people over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. So these are the 9 things that I do. I've got my YouTube, my free class we're doing tonight. I have a Patreon channel you can sign up for and have access to hundreds of videos. I'm a soil laboratory. to see what living organisms are in your soil that will make your mineral cycle work, so you don't have to buy fertilizer. I do a 17-week boot camp, and that is the 4 months here in the summertime, and I've got that filled up with people for this year, which is fantastic. And in that class, I teach my students how to start a career in farming. They learn the hands-on of vegetable production and soil health. And then we've got our 3-day boot camps, and the next one's coming up in 2 weeks from now, so that's pretty awesome. That'll be really fun. And then we've got the consulting. If you need help with your particular farm, garden, greenhouse, livestock, I can do some consulting to help you if you're running into problems. My book is out on the 22nd of this month, so that's so exciting. And of course, my newsletter. And if you want to be subscribed to my newsletter, go to my website, www.georgicrevolution.com, and put your email there on that first page, and then you'll be getting my newsletters. Tonight, our subject is to talk about creating an environment where plants can reach their genetic potential. I got this picture from a good friend of mine, Josh Adams. He raises alfalfa. This is an alfalfa leaf, and if you're familiar with alfalfa, you can see that this is very large. It's a really big leaf. Now, most alfalfa leaves are maybe the size of the dime. So this one is 3, 4, maybe 5. I don't know if it's 5 times bigger, but it's certainly 3 times as big as a common sized alfalfa leaf. And this is the way an alfalfa leaf ought to look. Most of the time in the alfalfa fields, the plants grow pretty good. You get pretty good tonnage, meaning a good yield per acre. But the problem is that the plants are stressed. They're not really working to reach the genetic potential that they actually have. And what I've found over the years is this is actually the way it is for a lot of the plants that we grow in agriculture. All the food plants, the forage plants that we grow for animals, a lot of times we can get them to grow, and it seems like they're doing well because we get a lot of yield. But that isn't necessarily mean that the plant is as healthy as it could be. And so that's what we have learned over the years, and it's super awesome. So what do we do to be able to get these plants to reach a genetic capacity like this? And there's a lot of things we can do, but tonight I just wanted to point out the ideas of covering the ground. So we could cover the ground with compost. That's what a vegetable gardener would do. You can cover the ground with wood chips. And there's a vegetable gardening method out there called Back to Eden. Paul Gauci, if you've followed his work, he says just get wood chips, get wood chips, get wood chips, and that's the one thing you do, and it fixes all your problems. If you talk to the people who do no dig, the Charles Dowdings of the world, and they're saying compost, compost, compost. They use some wood chip, but mostly it's all about compost. So are these people disagreeing? Not really. They're both covering the ground, and that's the key, is to cover the ground. And then if you get into big farming where we're talking about thousands of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres, then we're going to be covering the ground by growing a cover crop, and then we roll it down with a machine called a roller crimper, and that covers the entire ground with just the living plant, and then it's terminated at that point, meaning it kills it, and that cover crop is on the ground, it's covering it, and it's doing the same thing as the compost and the wood chips, but we're just have a way to do it on a really big scale. And then there's the idea of covering the ground with living plants. And this is something that Dr. Elaine Ingham talks about. Why can't we get a low growing plant that is, it's the kind of thing where we have one plant that is maybe like a thyme plant or a clover plant that's a little tiny one that's going to get maybe 6 inches high, and it's growing there all the time. And then we can plant bigger plants like corn inside. You're just right there where it's growing. But nobody's doing this commercially, so this is a new idea. There's people playing with it in their gardens, and I don't mean to be condescending by saying playing with it. It's just that I have never talked to anybody who really is doing this. It's things that are being talked about in the scientific community, but we need millions of people around the world. It'd be good to start with hundreds, but really we need millions of people around the world who are playing with and testing all different kinds of species of a living ground cover plant, and then you're growing crops that are coming out of it. And the reason you would do that is that would keep your microbiology growing all the time, so that your microbes would be there, and the populations would remain at a high level. Because when you terminate a crop, like rolling down a cover crop, any microbes that are alive, they're going to die until your next crop starts growing. And so you have, your population changes. It gets high when the plants are growing, it gets low when the plants die, and then it grows back again as your next plants are growing. Now, is that a bad thing to terminate crops? No, it's not. But I just think that there's room for improvement if we could test a lot of these new things that people are talking about on a big scale in dozens or even hundreds of climates around the world. So those are things that are on the scientific, the forefront of testing, and there's not a lot of information about the green cover, a living cover plant right now. But the wood chips and compost and cover crops that are being rolled down, those have been proven. Those are time tested and proven. Some of those have been done for thousands of years. But what are the benefits to covering the ground? However you cover it doesn't matter. The fact is we want to keep it covered. We never want to see bare ground. What are the benefits? And I just put 8 of them here, and I just typed these in real quick right before this started. And there are others, but these are the ones that were on the top of my head. But it stabilizes the temperature. When your sun hits the ground, it gets hot, and that kills microbes, and it's hard on young plants. And then when it's cool at night in the springtime and the nights cool off, well, your ground gets cold, and that's hard on your plants. So when you keep your ground covered with whatever method you choose, wood chips, compost, whatever, then it keeps that temperature stabilized. Now, whatever we're covering the ground with becomes food for microbes. So whether it's compost or wood chips or the cover crops, it is food for the microbes. And I had a question recently. Well, what if you have the green living plant there, the low growing ground cover? How's that going to feed a microbe? Well, it might actually feed them better than the decomposing plants, because a living plant will put exudates into the soil. And so that's one of your best food sources. But there's a lot of microbes that do decompose the other things, and then as they decompose, it releases the minerals, and it makes your mineral cycle work. So if you don't have a covered soil, it's very hard for your mineral cycle to keep going, which is number 3 there. And so by covering and keeping that soil covered, it really enhances that mineral cycle to keep going. And it's very important to keep that mineral cycle going, because that is what keeps your whole your whole system running. Thomas Jefferson said that, he wrote it, and you can look that up and read it, but he said that the soil runs out of the ability to grow plants after 15 years. So we will go in and we'll clear a forest and we'll plow it up and we can grow crops for 15 years and then it won't grow them anymore. And we don't know why. And that's what he said, is we don't know why. Well, today, with all the research that's been done since he was alive, we certainly know why. And it's because we kill the microbes and the mineral cycle stops. And that's why the plants won't grow anymore, is because they can't absorb the nutrients, because we don't have the microbes that are driving the mineral cycle. So yeah, we've got to keep that ground covered to keep that mineral cycle working. Number 4, water retention. So when the sun comes down and it hits that ground, that water can just evaporate very quickly if your soil is bare. And so keeping the ground covered, we can retain that water. So if we get an inch of water from a rainstorm, that can keep a well-covered soil growing plants for a month, in hot weather. And people say, oh, no, that's not true. Well, it is true if you look at nature, because a good inch of water in Mother Nature, where you have, the 7 layers of plants, you're going to have big trees, small trees, shrubs. You've got the ground covered with all kinds of living plants, grasses, vegetation. That type of a system doesn't look like it is suffering. It takes a while, and it's because you have a really well covered ground. And remember that those 7 layers of plants are a form of ground cover. They are living plants that are covered. So yeah, is a tree growing and casting shade on the ground, do you consider that covering the ground? Absolutely, that is part of the definition. So number 5, it protects the soil from compaction. The way that covering the ground with, wood chips or whatever, any of these, is because when a raindrop falls and hits bare soil, that is one of the number 1 ways to compact the soil. It causes micro-compaction, and certain soils will crust over after a rainfall and be so hard that they're almost like concrete, and you can get 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 an inch, that's very, very hard. And certain plants, seeds won't even germinate. Well, they'll germinate, but they can't penetrate that. So by keeping the soil covered, then the raindrop is dispersed and then it gently flows into that soil underneath. So that's how it protects it from compaction. Number 6 is it encourages something. I forgot to write in what I was thinking. What was I going to write there? Anyway, number 7, it creates a home for beneficial microbes, and it reduces weeds. Number 8. Number 6 was earthworms, is what I was going to put there. It encourages lots of earthworms, which is fantastic because that creates your drillosphere, which are the holes that go deep into the soil, so that microbes can get deep in, water can get deep in, oxygen can get deep in. So these are just some of the benefits off the top of my head that I threw in here so that we can just have this quick discussion about covering the ground. So this spring, as you're getting your gardens going, if you have bare ground, if you have a traditional tillage system, remember that tilling the soil is going to expose your ground and uncover it. So cover your ground and cover it with anything you can get, any kind of an organic matter. No, I'm not talking about plastic. I'm not talking about man-made materials. I am talking about things that decompose. Anything, wood, grass clippings, any type of barnyard manures, old rotten hay, anything that will rot are good things to cover the ground with. So this is just a reminder to cover the ground. So we can open this up for questions. A quick reminder before we do questions: Spring Boot Camp, April 27, 28, 29. And it's basically full, but I could add a couple more people if you want to come, and I will teach you everything I know when you come here for those 3 days. It will be hands-on, and you can get in the garden and get your fingernails dirty, and we can play with the earthworms. And we were going to be making extract from compost and building a garden and planting seeds, all the things we need to grow food. And then the 17-week course, we have a waiting list, and we already have one person signed up for next year, 2024. I suspect this will fill up. So if you are a person who can come here on site for 4 months, usually those are college-aged type people. And if you want to come, get signed up for 2024. The pricing here that you can see on this PowerPoint here of for 3,500, that is the 2023 price. The price could change in 2024, but go ahead and get signed up and save your place. The way you sign up is go to my website, www.georgicrevolution.com, and click on the 17-week boot camp. And there will be a page there that talks about creating an application. And so write me an email, go through the steps there, and I can train you how to be an expert in soil health and how to grow food. So let's go. I'm going to stop this screen share here. And Lindsay has a question here. Here we go. Is winter wheat a good cover crop to plant in the fall after harvest? The answer is yes. Would you just plant directly into the wheat in the spring? Yeah, so you can do wheat after wheat after wheat. It's very good for the soil. I don't know that I'd go more than 5 years. You know, of the same crop. I love to rotate crops, and I love to have the crops like having 6 or 7, even 20 different species growing at the same time. But I do really love having the any of those cereals, wheat, oats, barley, triticale. Those are all fantastic to plant in the garden. Yeah, so you have your garden soil and you've got your vegetables, whatever they are, it doesn't matter. You can plant wheat in the spring, you can plant it in the fall. It just depends where you live and what varieties of wheat you're growing and want to grow. If I was going to grow one mainly just for the soil, I would grow rye, cereal rye. No, don't confuse that with ryegrass. Ryegrass is good, but don't confuse, because here's the thing, there's annual ryegrass, and it can be a good plant. And then there's perennial ryegrass, and if you're planting that in your garden, then you're in trouble. So just be careful when you buy your cover crop seed, that if you want to get rye, you are looking for cereal rye. So it's the grain that you're looking for, not a grass. But any of those are fantastic to plant. So if you have like late plants that you like, say you have a bunch of carrots and things and you're wanting to harvest them later in the year, like maybe you're going to keep them in the ground until Thanksgiving or Christmas. And, you know, this depends on where you are, because some people are going to be under 2 feet of snow by then. But other places, you still have a beautiful crop. And you may have a bunch of late cabbages that are going to go way late towards Thanksgiving. And if you're doing that, then you would want to plant your crops, your grasses, you know, maybe in the springtime might be more appropriate. If you're wanting to take a bunch of those winter grasses, and by grasses, I'm talking about the cereal grains that go, you know, you can plant any of them in the spring or the you know, the fall. Now, if you're wanting to get a really good crop of grain off of it, then you need to know when you should plant each specific variety in relationship to the climate where you grow. But as far as just a cover crop, grow them anytime in the cool season. You can grow them and get them to grow. Okay, any more questions? We've got several people on here.
I have a question.
Zeke, go ahead.
So there's a thought I've been having for a little while about a lot of the regenerative agriculture and getting your systems all together. We talk a lot about in the early years making sure you have good composts to get your bacterial cultures in the soil to kind of jumpstart these cycles, and then the cover cropping and all of that to get this working. And in my mind, that was just something that you always did forever, is you're always making compost to add back into the soil. But like the number one thing that you're pulling out when you take a cart of plants away is cellulose and fiber, and that all comes from carbon in the air, mostly is where that comes from. So most of what you're shipping out is transformed air. It's not like you're mining lots of soil out usually, other than minerals, which theoretically your fungus would be getting you more of than you could ever use if it's healthy. So my question is there a point, if you got all of your cycles to where they really were good and you were monitoring them and keeping on them, that you could only do composts and stuff when necessary instead of it just being a regular thing that you do? Maybe that doesn't make sense, but that's kind of my question.
No, yeah, I think I know where you're going. So yeah, I mean, in the old days, we used to think, what do I mean by the old days? 15 years ago, that's the old days to me. 15 years ago, I used to think we always have to make compost every year, and we have to spread that on our gardens every year to keep our fertility where it is. All right? Because that's what I thought, and that's what I believed, because that's what all the gardening books have said. And then I started learning new things about soil science. And most of the carbon that goes into the soil, which ends up in your plants, which is what most of your plants are made out of. I mean, sugars, proteins, carbon. It comes from the air. It goes into the soil, and it stays in the soil through the roots. So most of the carbon, let's do this in numbers. Let's say you have something that you pick and eat, like a lettuce plant. It's going to produce more carbon that goes into the soil than what you pick and take away in the plant. Okay, and this is pretty much true for most plants that are out there. Here's the problem, and why our soils are losing carbon is because between every crop we till it up. And when we till the soil, then that stimulates a certain group of bacteria that eat the carbon, and then when they digest it, they blow it off as gas, as CO2, which goes back into the atmosphere, which is fine because that's just part of that mineral cycle. So if we stop tilling and we leave that carbon in the soil, because it will naturally stay there, and then we just are replanting every year and we're skipping that tillage, then we don't have to add so much carbon back to the soil. So, I mean, you're talking about compost, but I mean, compost and carbon, they're kind of the same thing in context of the question you asked. So no, we don't have to be making compost every single year. There's farms out there they make a big old compost pile, and they do a really good job at the compost so that it has a good amount of the beneficial fungus and beneficial bacteria and a whole bunch of really good beneficial nematodes. And then they take that compost, they spread it on their land, and now they have introduced the good microbes that I just mentioned. And once you get them on the land, if they have a food source and a water source, they will multiply and stay alive. And so what's their food source and water source? Well, the water source is water, so rain, irrigation, whatever. And the food source would be the living plants that are growing. That's why one of the major food or soil health principles is to keep a living root in the soil, because that living root will feed those microbes and keep them alive. And so, no, we don't have to be making compost every year if we make sure that there are plenty of microbes in the soil and that they stay fed. And so could you go, once you get them fed, do you ever have to make compost again? Not really. I mean, you theoretically, if you are managing your land properly, you make one compost when you first start this thing. For 1 year, you make compost. The next year, you put that compost out there, and the compost introduces or inoculates, it's two words, the same thing. We introduce those beneficial microbes because they're not there probably if it's been farmed with tillage for a long time. So we introduce them, and then we manage the land so that it continually feeds those guys by covering the soil, which we talked about today. So we keep the soil covered, and we keep living plants growing in there as much as possible, which is 100% of the time, really, unless you have a really long, cold winter with ice everywhere. But even then, you can have, I mean, like say you're dealing with pastures, or you have a crop that you plant in the fall that is overwintering, and then it comes to life in the spring, like wheat or oats or barley or something. So did that answer your question?
I think so. So would it be necessary to every few years do like a maintenance thing where you go back through and spray new stuff on at all? Or once you get it there, is it completely self-sufficient?
Yeah. So if you're managing properly, it's completely self-sufficient. So people worry and say, oh man, that was a lot of work to make that compost. I don't want to do that ever again. Well, you don't have to do it ever again. That is the entire point of good soil health management, is that once you get the microbes out there, you can keep them alive by keeping the ground covered and keeping that living root in the soil. And then, there's some other minute things, but those are the two major things. So, yeah, do we need to know how to make great compost? Absolutely, because most of our soils are depleted of the proper microbes. And that's why we have to have fertilizer. So, you go talk to anybody who grows plants and ask them a question. Ask them, can you grow a crop without fertilizer? And most people, 99% of people, probably over 99%, not 100%, but over 99, will say, no, I have to have fertilizer. Everybody knows you need fertilizer. And they look at you like you're kind of a fool, because every farmer knows you have to have fertilizer, because that's the world we live in. That is the paradigm we live in. But actually, we don't, once the soil is functioning. Okay, I have a question here in the chat we're going to go to. Melanie asks, do you know of something that will both look beautiful as well as produce something that I can plant on south-facing front yard that does not get a lot of sun because of a big tree that shades it? There's been green bushes, but they've been taken out to plant something that produces. So something with low sunlight that looks beautiful, as well as produce something. I mean, there's hundreds of plants that fit that bill. It really comes back to what you want specifically. What are your goals? Are you wanting you want food? I mean, is that a big part of it? How much food? Yeah. Okay. She answered yes in the chat. So, something beautiful. Beautiful is a problem, because that's an aesthetic that one person may not think it's beautiful and another one would.
I think certain times of creeping time might fit the bill.
Yeah, that's a good point, Zeke. Um, Melanie, talk to me about this.
Okay. So, maybe something like a fruit or like a berry or something, possibly.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know.
So
And
how
my husband really wants it to look good. He's sad that I wanted to take the bushes out, but I thought they were just way too big and overpowering. And
yeah,
anyway, but I also wanted the space for something that would produce us something to eat.
yeah. How much sun does it get? I mean, I know you said it was shady, but
Yeah, mostly like from the side in the morning, the the east side will get some sun in the morning, and then the west side, or yeah, the west side will get it a little bit in the evening, but like in the middle of the day, that tree is in the way of it getting that afternoon sun.
okay,
So
yeah. Okay, remind me where you live. Like what?
Riverton, Utah.
Yeah, okay. Um, do you like berries? I mean, like raspberries might be a good thing. Raspberries, blackberries could be fun. I don't know. That may not be the aesthetic you're thinking of though, because they can look kind of hairy and wild. So
Preferably something maybe that's a little more beautiful.
yeah, okay, sure. What about strawberries? They're low growing and they look more manageable.
Maybe I think my husband would like something that is taller, preferably. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
I could put strawberries there. I do have strawberries in other parts of the front yard.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Um, yeah, I mean, you could do some fruit trees. They do like full sun though, but you could certainly do some fruit trees, and you could just trim them so that they're really small. Apples, peaches, and you could just cut them back during the growing season. You can summer prune them. So when let's say, so you're gonna leaf out in April and May there where you are. And so in June, I would say around mid-June, you could go through and cut all, like just with the hedge trimmer. I don't know if you have a hedge trimmer, but you could just hedge trim that whole tree and you can create the uh a really beautiful looking tree. You can shape fruit trees to be any shape you want. People normally don't, but they respond fine to that. And peach trees are pretty. Peaches are nectarine trees. They could be really beautiful if you keep them pruned, a certain way.
Can you do that with mulberry trees?
Yes, yes, you can.
The one, yeah, because it would have to be kind of small. There's a large window there that I don't think we want really covered, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
right,
but
right. And there's some good suggestions in the chat here. Uh,
awesome.
like currants, would be good.
Mm.
I just don't know how, elderberries, cherry tomatoes, you'd have to do them every year. They're not a perennial, obviously. Well, they are, but
Yeah.
not Everton.
Is it do currants or elderberries kind of look half decent in the winter time, or are they
So
more sticks?
yeah, they're a shrub. That'd be like a large shrub. Well, the elderberries are like they can get 6, 8 feet tall, but you can prune them and trim them to be whatever shape you want during that early growth stage, late May to mid June. You can trim them with a hedge trimmer. And people think that's crazy when they first hear that, but the peaches do really good. I have a fantastic book. It's called The Peach, and it's 1,000 pages that's just about peaches. And I drove my wife nuts for a year because all I did is read this book, and I read it 5 or 6 times, and I'm like, hey, listen to this. But there's this guy in Israel, and he took peach trees and he planted them like 2 feet apart. It was crazy. because you wouldn't plant trees that much, right? But he did these like that close together, but they're very close together. And he kept them like 3 feet high, 3 or 4 feet tall, but they were hedges. And he would drive his tractor up and down the row and with a just a mower on it that was kind of like a hedge trimmer type thing he rigged up. And so he had these huge long hedges of peaches, and from far back it looked like an English hedge, like some you'd have around your yard. But
Yeah, that's what I want. That would be
well,
perfect.
you can do it with peaches.
That would be great.
And I know it because I mean there's the case studies out there proving it. So that'd work. As far as the shade goes, I don't think you're too shady for that because
Okay.
I mean, if you're getting some morning sun and some afternoon sun, but it's just under a big shade tree, it might actually be really good because sometimes plants suffer in the heat of the day. You know, from noon to 3 o'clock when it's super hot, it's nice to have a little shade on some of those shorter plants.
Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna look into that. Should I get that book then, or?
No, yeah,
Okay.
you won't like it. It's a
Okay.
technical, it's just a scientific, technical. It's something that I would geek out about, but no, you don't need it.
Okay, so is there somewhere online I can look up about how to do that, or this guy in Israel or anything?
I this oh yeah, I'm stuttering and stammering.
It's okay if you don't
The
know.
easy answer is no.
Okay.
I don't know of anybody doing this. Do you know how a hedge looks around a person's yard and they're out there with their hedge trimmer once a month in the summertime doing it? That's
Yeah.
what you're going to do to your peach tree.
Okay, so you don't want to buy a very big peach tree then, right? Because you're then cutting it off.
Yeah, get 3 or 4 small peach trees, and what you're going to be cutting off is the new growth. When those buds come out, you'll have a little branch, and the entire branch will be green. By mid-June, it'll be anywhere from 8 inches to 2 feet long, depending on how fast it's growing. But that whole branch will be green. And so when you go out there to look at it, it won't turn brown until next year. It turns brown towards the fall. And so when you have that long branch that's, say, a foot long, cut half of it back. So you'd cut 6 inches of it off. And what's going to happen, here's the technical thing that happens. When you remove the end of each of those branches, it removes a hormone in the plant called an auxin. You don't need to know this. I'm just telling you so you can understand it. But it removes that phytohormone in the tip. And what will happen is the rest of the branch will send out a whole bunch of bushy. So you'll get 5 or 6 more branches growing out of it, out of the 6 inches that you left. And so after you prune this back for 2 or 3 years, it's going to be this awesome looking solid hedge. I don't know why more people don't do this in their yards because it's beautiful. And I've seen people, you know what a bonsai tree is? The Japanese bonsai? People have done that with fruit trees. And they have these little tiny, beautiful trees that are like 2 feet across, and they trim them kind of like that. And, you know, and you'll get full-size fruits on them. You don't get very many. On a little tiny bonsai tree, you'll get 3 peaches. But in your yard, if you let that tree get maybe 5 feet or tall or whatever, or 3 feet tall, whatever you want, then you could get, 50 peaches off each tree for sure.
So you think a peach tree would be the best for that, like as opposed to anything else, any
Yeah.
other?
Peaches and nectarines are going to respond a little better to that than an apple or a pear.
Okay.
Or cherries.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
You bet. One more thing. If you want to do any annual like garden stuff in there, cherry tomatoes are a good idea. There's a variety called Sweet Million.
Sweet Million. Okay.
Yeah, and you just go online and search Sweet Million cherry tomato to find a place that has the seeds.
Okay.
And they will have clusters on the blossom stem, that can have up to 40 or 50 fruits on each blossom stem. So you truly can get hundreds and hundreds. You won't actually get a million, but it seems like you're getting millions of them. So if you love cherry tomatoes, the way that you trellis them against the side of a house, or if you have a lattice work or something, you can tie the branches up as it goes up. And I've seen people create really beautiful, pieces of artwork in their yard with those cherry tomato plants.
Oh, great.
So that's
Awesome.
an idea. It's a lot of work. You're going to have to be out there twice a week messing with it and tying it up and all that stuff. But if that's what you're wanting to do, then it's fantastic. So,
Okay, nice. Wonderful words of wisdom. Thanks.
you bet. Okay, we have time for one or two more questions.
I have one, another Melanie.
Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know that our compost is completely done. And so what can we do to our square foot garden beds and our huge garden that is just topsoil that's all compacted right now? What are some things that we can do to help that along? And then square foot gardens, this is our second year with them.
Okay. So you're saying you have more compaction than you like in your square garden, right?
Gardens, that's in the great big garden bed that we haven't even planted anything in this year. They put the last fall, and now it's all compacted. It's even split. You know how the ground splits when it gets hard and crusty.
Yeah, it's cracked up. Yeah. Okay, well, you need to cover it with 6 to 8 inches of detritus.
Where do we get it?
What's that, Melanie?
No, where do we get it now? We don't have, I don't know that our compost is really done.
What does it look like?
Well, it's
It's
all
not-
brown.
So listen,
Yeah, but it's been cold out, it's in a barrel, so it's not,
So it's been frozen solid this winter, right?
yes.
Yeah. Okay, here's what you need to do. Dump it out on top of your garden and spread it out.
okay,
It's fine.
okay.
I mean, since it froze, then you don't have very many living microbes in it. But just get it out there on the soil surface. And then whatever microbes there are in the soil or in that compost, they will start going to work. If you leave it in the barrel, like throughout the summer, it's not really going to be a great benefit to anything. So just get it on your soil surface right now. And I would leave it, 2 to 3 inches thick. So if you don't have enough to cover the whole garden, that's fine. But the part that you do cover, it'll be more of a benefit if you leave it a couple inches thick.
Okay, and let's see, I have another question. Just looking at your photo behind you.
Yeah.
Really looks beautiful. Do you use a leaf cutter to cut up your leaves?
No, I don't. We have a chipper shredder that we use
Oh, that's beautiful.
to, but maybe that's what you meant. But
Like a worm.
yeah, we do have a chipper. It's a big one. It goes on the back of a great big tractor.
Okay,
So we can put like a 4-inch thick branch in, and it just chews that up within about 50 seconds, less than a minute.
beautiful.
Big long one, 20, 30 feet long, that's 4 inches around. So when we have trees that blow down in the wind, we can chip them up and put them on the garden.
Just thinking, if we don't have a lot of compost, would it be maybe a good idea to put some in each planting that we do, around each planting a little bit to nourish?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that for sure. That's a good idea. But you know where you go out there, just anywhere on your garden, if you look straight down and you see dirt, you're going to be struggling to grow anything. You need to get that covered with 4 to 6 inches of wood chips. Even, a foot is better, 8 inches to 12 inches is better, but that can get expensive. So, 4 to 6 inches is more realistic for a lot of people. But yeah, wood chips, whatever you can find.
We did get the stuff at Home Depot, no, at Lowe's, 100 bags. We got this yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, get it on there, get it covered up. That'll be fantastic.
And it'll break down slowly.
Yes, it will. It will break down slowly.
Okay, and then in the fall, when we have more leaves, just put them on top of it, right?
Yeah, put them on top. And you want to have a sprinkler system so you can sprinkle it when you put this stuff down to keep it wet so the wind doesn't blow it away, because things like leaves will be completely gone
Yes,
in a windstorm,
and we get them here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did we have any other questions that we were wondering about? Yesterday or whenever?
How about your trees?
What
Did you
about
have
the
any
trees?
questions?
What about them? Well, what were we talking about? We have fruit trees, of course, that, not quite sure if they're alive or not. The cherry trees, no, is it peach? What blooms first? What blossoms first?
Apricots bloom first,
Okay,
and then all the other ones come out about the same time.
okay, so they should be in bud right now and maybe ready to break open, or is it still too early here?
You need to compare that with your neighbors.
Oh, none of them have apricot.
So, William, someone told us that we should pick the flowers off
Yes,
so that the strength of the tree went or the foliage went down into the plant.
into the roots.
Yeah, so how old is your tree?
Some are, well, I don't know. We
We
planted
don't really
them
know.
last year and the year before.
And we don't know how old they were when we got them.
So
Okay, well, what I mean is how long since you transplanted? Did you plant them in the fall or the spring last year?
last year.
I would just the ones you planted if you planted in the fall, you could pick the blossoms off this year, but I never do. I don't think you need to. If the plant is stressed, it will usually abort the little fruits itself. And I'm not a believer in picking off the blossoms unless that would be like a last resort thing. Like if you're afraid your tree is gonna die. But I mean, you had them in the ground and were pruning last year and all that, I remember. So I think you're fine to leave them there. Like if you went to a nursery in June in the summer and you got a tree and you stuck it in the ground and transplanted it and it had a bunch of fruit on it or blossoms or whatever, that would be an appropriate time to pick those off so that the tree could grow and not worry about making fruit. That's when it would be appropriate. But where you've already had it planted and it's already gone through winter, there's no reason to pick that fruit off.
Okay,
And how can we tell if the tree is dead?
Wait another month until mid-May, and if the leaves don't come out, then it's dead.
All right.
thank you.
There is another way. You could walk out there and grab your stems and you can bend them real gently. And if they bend like 45 degrees, without breaking, then they're alive. But if you bend them and they snap like a piece of dead wood, then it's dead.
Okay.
So that's another way you can tell. But the easy way is just wait another month. Wait 5 more weeks and then you'll know for sure.
And then nobody has the tree to replace it this year. So, yeah.
All right. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, we have another question in the chat. Lindsay says, are you going to tell us how he got the alfalfa leaves to be that big, and referring to my picture in the PowerPoint. Yes, it was microbes. His alfalfa field is teeming with microbes. He has probably 400,000 species of microbes that we know about, because there's a lot of species we don't even know they exist yet. We can see them in a microscope, but there's no names for them, which is pretty awesome. And he puts out microbes, new microbes every year. And where it's an alfalfa field, it's a little bit harder to feed the microbes, because you're taking everything off your field. So it can be tricky with hay because you're removing every year. But what you can do with those alfalfa fields is take the manure from the livestock that eat the hay and spread it back over the field. And that's very good. But when you go out to these fields that are, people are adding something to adjust pH, like sulfur and gypsum and lime, depending on your soil type and what it needs, that kills microbes. It causes compaction to the soil. So those are methods that are in the past. The other thing is, when you are fertilizing a lot, in all those different types of fertilizers are salts. The definition of a salt is something that dissolves in water. So all of our fertilizers that we use, those high salts that are on that agricultural alfalfa, it takes the place of what the microbes do. And so the plants don't exudate out of the roots to feed the microbes, because the plants are in charge of what microbes grow. And so when we put all those salts on the ground to feed the crop, then the plants don't grow the microbes. And so the microbes eventually die out. And when your microbe count gets down to like under 10,000 species in your soil, your plants won't grow anymore, and then it requires the commercial fertilizer. And so it becomes this vicious cycle. So what my friend Josh does with his alfalfa fields is he makes sure that he has plenty of the microbes in that soil, lots of fungus, lots of the whole range of bacteria, fungus, protozoa, microarthropods, nematodes, all those guys. And we know that because we look at it with a microscope, and so we can know what's in those soils. And if we're missing a group, one of those 5 groups, like if we have no fungus, we got to get the fungus in there. And so we grow the fungus, and then we would apply it. We would do a compost extract and get it out there. And the way that you would feed the fungus in that system would be a fish hydrolysate in a commercial alfalfa system. So you would buy 55-gallon barrels or a tanker truck full, depending on how many acres you have, of fish hydrolysate, and that will feed the fungus and keep that fungus going. So that's how he did it, is he made sure that the soil had massive amounts of microbes. And how do you get those massive amounts of microbes in the soil? It's by feeding them. So feed the microbes. And how do you feed the microbes? By covering the ground. Cover the ground. So that's how he got those alfalfa leaves to be the size of a red clover leaf, which is uncommon. Okay, we are going to close this out tonight. I think we gave everybody the opportunity to ask a question, and we will be back next week. But 2 weeks from now is boot camp, so we won't be doing it that day. But we will be back next week, same time, same place. I'm glad to be here to help you guys have the best garden of your life. So good night.
Thank you.
You are welcome, everybody.
Can we just text you another question then?
Oh, go ahead and ask it right now.
Testing. You plant different things in different square foot gardens. and the raised beds. When you're doing testing, is it possible that one raised bed garden could be better than the other as far as microbes are concerned then?
Absolutely. Yeah, for
You
sure.
almost need to test each garden, which gets pricey then, right? Or what do you do?
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, if you need to learn to read your garden. If the garden looks the same, then you can, what I mean by that, let's just say if you have 5 beds, okay, Melanie, how many garden beds do you have? Just let's make this real.
We do have 5.
You got 5 beds. Okay. So in your 5 beds, plant the same thing in every bed. So put 1 tomato plant in each bed, put a radish in each bed, put a tree in each bed, put whatever you grow, peas, turnips. I don't know what you grow, but put a few of everything that you grow in each bed. This will give you diversity in each bed, and it will give you a practical test to see if your beds are responding the same. So if you have 3 beds where the tomato plants are great, and then 1 bed, the tomato plant did better than anything you've ever imagined, and then the other bed, the tomato plant doesn't hardly grow, then that tells you that there could be differences in the different beds. But if they all are the very same and they're not doing well at all, then you know that they're all kind of the same.
Okay, well, we did plant diversity. We did exactly as you said last spring.
Perfect.
We had at least 5 families in each bed. So hopefully we've got something going well.
Good. Yeah, that's great.
And then we want to add height to a couple other beds that were way too low. They were only about 4 inches, maybe 6 at the most. And now this year we want to add to that to give more soil for things to grow in. Maybe we'd like to even increase the heights of our other beds because they're not very high. They're no more than 12 inches, if even that deep. And so what would you suggest then to add to our, besides compost? And we do have some leaves, but not very many left now.
Why do you want to make them higher? What's your purpose for that?
To have a deeper root structure.
Okay, so are they on the concrete underneath?
No, did we put something underneath them?
Mm.
They were on a ground cover though, weren't they?
No,
Oh, okay. All right. So they're just on rocks.
Yeah, well, that's fine. Yeah, I don't think you need to make them any deeper. Did your plants not grow well in those beds that are shallow?
The only things that grew well were the tomatoes. Cabbage was horrible. Yeah, there were some things that did not do well at all.
Okay, so your tomatoes did good and your cabbage did poorly, right?
The carrots did poorly too.
And the carrots did poorly. Did you have a lot of wood chips in this material, in this bed?
No, I don't think so. No.
no,
Should we add wood chips this year?
No, not necessarily. It's just that carrots and cabbage are early succession plants, so they want more bacteria. So you need to have less fungal food because you need to grow more bacteria than fungus if you're going to grow those. Tomatoes are a late succession plant, which means they like to have more fungus in the soil. So if your tomatoes did good, then it means you probably had a condition that was more conducive to a late succession plant than cabbage.
And they were huge, not huge, Costco transplants. They were big.
Uh-huh.
Already had something in their pot to begin with.
So how big was the pot, the root ball when you put it in the ground?
At least a quart size, 2 quart maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's pretty big. So that may have had everything it needed to grow. Yeah, you could add more stuff to make it taller. You could certainly make it taller. I would, you know, compost is really good. Do you mow a lawn and save the lawn clippings at all? Because you could use that to put it on top of your garden bed. That'd work good. I think we lost Melanie and John. Okay, we're going to end this for the night. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week.